stressed out 12th graders in high school. They said, my essays are due, I gotta get my recommendations. Common App needs to be filled out. I hope you've created your account. Right? So what I want to do today is help those stressed out seniors in high school and give them some tips on some of the questions that I get a lot as a counselor and a consultant, both helping students apply as well as things that I've seen in my time as an interviewer at MIT. Okay. I'll start off. I actually, as Captain said, I don't quite understand how we introduce you, but I think you guys have the gist of it. I graduated from MIT. Since I graduated in 1998, I've been an interviewer. So whenever you apply to any of the top schools, you get an interview as part of your application, right? And so over those 19 years, I've interviewed probably 300-400 students. So I have a pretty good perspective on what makes a student a top student. What are some great things that students have done to impress me? And I've been able to know the backgrounds and what are the key things that tend to help applicants get in at a higher rate than the rest. It's also a pretty small community. I have a lot of friends who interview for other Ivy Leagues, and we compare notes. Every year we talk about, well, what did you see this year? Oh my gosh, let me tell you about this student. He was fantastic. So there's a lot of insight, not just from people who apply to MIT, but the top schools overall. We also have, I have a couple of colleagues who collectively we focus on the Ivies and the top schools. Like there's basically 10 schools that I think I get the most common focus on across all parents. The 8 Ivies, MIT, and Stanford. Right, so we have a team very much focused on that given our experience. Emily, she also graduated from MIT with 2 degrees, bachelor's and master's, but in materials. And then we have an old timer, Dr. James Sung. He was a PhD in 1976, the year I was born. So he lends a historical perspective to this. We globally at EduBridge, and you see the nice signs that I can't read, unfortunately. Not only helping the top schools, but also the high schools in the U.S. and Canada, as well as any college that you might want to go to. I want to especially flash up some of the pictures that introduce Wendy because she is local here. So if you can see the face, memorize it because she is local to this community. But okay, let's get to the meat of what I want to talk about today in the content, which is I want to cover 5 things over the next hour or so, and then we'll have some time for questions. The first is there's been a lot of news recently coming out about SATs, around what the top schools are accepting, what's optional. Somebody also sued Harvard, and we actually learned a lot about how Harvard thinks about admissions through the course of that. So I'll talk about some of the insights. The second thing then is a question I get a lot in pretty much every talk I give, so I might as well just talk about it now to everybody rather than wait for Q&A, which is, okay, what's better? A 4.0 from a weak school, 3.8 from a strong school. How do colleges know the difference? And similarly, at the next level down, okay, is it better to get a 4.0 or to get an A from a regular class or a B plus or a B from an AP class? All questions like this, so we'll talk a little bit about that. The third thing then is around the interview. So the next year, just around key components that you're probably facing right now if you're applying to college, or you should start thinking about now if you're a little bit younger, which is, okay, how do I have a great interview? And I'll share some tips and also explain what goes on in an interview behind the scenes. You just show up, are totally stressed out, try to talk as best you can about yourself, and then something magical happens after that. You don't know what it is. Right? So I'm going to try to demystify that and tell you, okay, what happens after that interview? And how does it play a role in the overall application evaluation? I'm going to talk a little bit about essays, right? And and try to impart to you the importance of looking at your application from a holistic perspective. Right? All the components need to work together. Don't look at the essay in isolation. Don't think, oh, just because I have a great transcript, I'm done, and I don't have to worry about the essay. It all has to work together. And I'll close out with, okay, mistakes. What are the common mistakes? The most common mistakes, the most damaging mistakes that I've seen, and how you can avoid them and not make those mistakes, okay? So let's dive right in. Some of the recent changes. The first, if you're paying attention to the news here, Harvard and Princeton said, we don't want the SAT writing requirement anymore. We'll take your verbal, we'll take your math, we don't need the writing section anymore. We actually don't want it. And they join a bunch of other schools that take this approach. There are also schools that are saying, you know what, the SAT 2 or SAT subjects, right, math, physics, chemistry, those are optional. If you don't have it, it's not going to hurt you in your application. And I'll talk a little bit about why they did that. And the third then, as I said, somebody sued Harvard. They said, you are discriminating against Asians. It's too hard for Asians to get into Harvard, disproportionately hard. So I'll talk about that, as well as, we're not going to decide yes or no on that, but there's actually an incredible amount of interesting insight we learned about the Harvard admissions process through this lawsuit. And then finally, for some of the younger kids, I see, our future generation of Ivy League stars here, a lot of the top high schools in America have said, we're going to get rid of AP classes. And I've had some parents ask me in a panic, oh my gosh, does that mean APs are irrelevant? What do I do now if they're getting rid of APs? And so we'll talk about, okay, what does that really mean? Okay, so let's address the first two together. So why did these schools say, I don't need the SAT writing anymore and I'm making the SAT subjects optional? It's because there's a big movement in America right now to address inequality. The reason they're saying it is because it's enough of a hardship for poor families to even pay the money to take the SAT. I don't want to make them pay additional to take the SAT subjects test. If they can't afford it, I'm going to make it optional. Guys, most of the folks in this room are probably pretty good at the SAT subjects in math, biology, chemistry, and physics. They said it's optional. They'll take it if you send it in, and they'll use it as part of your evaluation criteria. So if you think you do well on those, you should take the SAT subjects. And if you're going to apply to multiple schools, there are some schools that still want these SAT subjects courses, right? MIT says, I want a math and I want a science. So there's no practical impact for most of the folks here on that piece of news. On the flip side, though, the writing is a big deal. Why? Well, so I think a lot of you have probably taken an SAT prep class. Right? You do the worksheets, you do the practice exams, you listen to what they say, and all of a sudden your test scores magically go up. What it did for me, I raised it by like 150 points by doing Princeton Review 20 years ago. That is an unfair advantage for people who can afford SAT prep classes. Right? That's always going to happen, but what they're saying now with these policies is, look, for the writing, I don't want to game it. I actually want to know what you can do. So I want a writing sample. I want a graded English essay that you've written, instead of something that a prep class can train you to write really well. Yikes. A lot of students this year go, oh my God, I don't have an essay that's good. My essays are terrible. What do I do? So for the younger kids in high school right now, plan ahead. The English essays you have to write in 9th grade and 10th grade and 11th grade, don't just do the bare minimum to get by. Think about early on, what is the killer essay that's going to impress the teacher and get me a good mark on that essay that I can submit as my writing sample. So start planning early. Don't wait until you're in the 12th grade and I don't have any more English assignments before my early action applications due. What happens? Right? Or my English teacher retired last year. I can't get a copy of a graded writing sample anymore. What do I do? Right, so start thinking about that now. That's pretty important. Okay, second thing, the Harvard law, or the third thing rather, the Harvard lawsuit. Look, everybody knows it's hard to get into Harvard. Right? They took less than 5% of their students every year. It's actually really hard. It's even harder if you're a Chinese boy. Because I think that is like the hardest type of student to get into Harvard. Because there's 10,000 Chinese boys who like math, have straight A's, perfect SATs, play badminton, play piano and violin, right? And volunteer at a homeless shelter or a nursing home or a tutor. There is literally 10,000 of those of that exact same profile. Harvard accepts 1,500. They can't possibly accept 1,500 Chinese boys of that profile. So, like it or not, naturally there is a smaller set of opportunities for people who fit that profile, and they have to work much harder to distinguish themselves from all the others like them. Okay, so the lawsuit was interesting because it actually tells you how Harvard thinks about evaluating these students. What it says is, okay, there's 4 criteria and an overall score. And I'm going to rate you each student from 1 to 6, and also be able to add in some comments. And the criteria is, number 1, academics. Right? Can they do the work? Are they smart? So this is GPA, this is test scores, this is APs. Number 2 is extracurriculars. Clubs, activities, accomplishments, awards. The third, and this is actually, when I compare notes with my colleagues for other schools, this is actually a little bit different. Athletics. They care about athletics. You don't necessarily have to be good at it, right? So there are plenty of people who get in without a strong athletics, but they care about that. Right? I have a student, his grades were okay. I mean, he was like any other of the Chinese boys, but he was a state champion in track. The second fastest person in California in the 800-meter run. Got him into Harvard. Right? MIT's not, well, I mean, MIT will care about that because that's quite an accomplishment, but it doesn't have the same specific call out of athletics in the evaluation criteria. The fourth one is the mysterious one, and really what they got sued over, right, which is personal. This is your personality traits. Are you a leader? Do you have perseverance? Do you have initiative? Are you entrepreneurial? Can you make a difference in the overall community? Everybody knows, if I go to Harvard, I'm going to benefit. If you're a student and Harvard accepts you, you're going to benefit. But how is Harvard going to benefit from having you there? And how can you demonstrate that if you go to Harvard, you can contribute to the betterment of the university and the other students around you? That's what they care about, right? That's one of the critical pieces of the personal thing, right? So a lot of questions I get are focused on a small piece, narrow piece of that. Oh, how do I become a better leader? It's not about just leadership. It's not about being a president of some club. It's about being able to have impact in your community, to be able to make the people all around you have an improved aspect of their lives. No university wants a student who's super smart, a genius, comes home from class and just locks the door and studies. There's no benefit to the university. Right? They want them to contribute, to work with others. At a minimum, to help participate in some of the research projects and help their peers learn the material. But it's also the most intangible. And this is the one where they got sued because they think they score the Asians lower on personal than everything else. I don't know how they're going to prove it. The lawsuit's going to go on for a while, but this is super interesting. Right? And then overall is a blend of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mathematical average. Okay, so given all of that, look, guys, your application, the essay part of it is incredibly important. Because where else do you talk about stuff like this? I mean, there are other places, but the real key in a lot of these outside of academics lies in the essay, lies in the interview, lies in the teacher recommendations. Your transcripts only cover this part. Right? That's why it's super important to look at your application from a total perspective. Each component of it is a tool that has to work together to tell the story about you, to convince Harvard, 10,000 other people look just like me, why am I better? Why should you pick me over the 9,999 others? Okay? Finally, for the high school-oriented folks, look, what does it mean for the AP, right? So there's two questions I often get, and I'll answer the second one as well after this. So there's a group of elite high schools, private high schools in the US that says, we're not going to have AP courses anymore. What does that mean? That means that they will not follow the official AP curriculum. Okay. So a lot of schools, when you offer an AP class, the AP ETS gives you the curriculum that you have to follow. Right? They say, you have to teach this. Unit 1, it's this. Unit 2 is this. Unit 3. And so all the schools follow that. So it's great in that if I take an AP class in any high school in the country, in Canada, in the US, I know what is being taught. I know the content of what's being taught. Now, the teacher might be good or bad, but I know what's being taught because it's consistent. When I get a 5 on that AP exam, I know what that means, right? Because everybody takes that same exam having learned the same curriculum. The problem with that is these elite schools say, pay me $50,000 a year to go teach you this AP curriculum. That's bad marketing when there's a bunch of public schools out there that do the exact same thing, and really good ones. So they have to differentiate. This is marketing for the public, or for the private high schools. This is how they differentiate themselves from the public schools and why they should write the big check. Or you should write them the big check. All right, so at the end of the day, though, after having taken the Sidwell Friends or the Phillips Exeter math class, you still take the AP Calculus BC exam. Right, so the students will still take the exam because that's what the colleges care about and look at. It's just they're saying we're going to teach it a different way. We think we can teach it a better way. This is not new, though. Like as I said, there's Phillips Exeter, Andover, a lot of them, they already do this. They've done this for a while. Like Exeter doesn't have a math textbook that you can buy. They create all the material themselves. And yeah, having not gone there or seen it, I don't know if they do it better than a straight AP class, but it is, that's their value. So that's recent news. The second thing is, okay, I promised you I'd talk about one other question that I often get around APs, which is, what's better, AP or IB? And so the answer is, it's the same. 20 years ago, when I was applying, nobody had actually heard of IB. So if you asked me that question 20 years ago, I would have said, I don't know what IB is, but APs are good. A lot has changed in the past 20 years. Now most schools know what IB is. Most schools view IB H-level, high-level classes the same as AP. So don't worry about it. Now, for me, the key difference is being a part of the IB program drags a lot of baggage with it. And I don't use that in a negative way, but it forces you to take a set of courses that you have to do. There's a set of requirements there. APs, they don't care. Right? AP says you can take AP in one subject or whatever, but if you're part of an overall IB program, it's very structured in the classes that you have to take, at least the most that I've seen. So that's the trade-off. In terms of the rigor of the program or how colleges are going to look at it, it doesn't really matter. So don't worry about it. Okay? All right, so let's move on to schools. Topic of schools. Good versus bad, what should I do? Look, at the end of the day, if a school consistently sends applicants, a high school, consistently sends applicants to a college, they're going to get to know them. If a school consistently has students accepted at that college, you're going to get to know them. The admissions group will get to know them. And that's how they figure out, okay, how hard is this class really, or how easy is this class really? Now, unfortunately, there's 26,000 public schools and 11,000 private schools just in the US alone. So you're never going to be able to cover all of them. You'll never know all of them. So if you go to a school admissions committees don't necessarily know, it's not the end of the world. If you go to a school that's not as strong and you don't have all the APs available at a great school, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean you lost your chance to get into Harvard or Princeton or Yale. What it does mean, though, is that you're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to show initiative, right? So, overall theme, no matter what school you go to, take as many APs as you can. It doesn't have to be related to your major. Show that you can take a difficult workload, that you can learn hard content, not just in your area of expertise, but in other areas as well. That you're a well-rounded learner. So me personally, look, I was a computer science major, right? So I took AP computer science, of course, and I also did calculus, biology, chemistry, physics. I also took European history. I liked European history. Right? Nothing to do with my major. I don't know that it added any value, but it was just nice to do. I was interested in it, and it helps just to show, hey, I can do hard courses, not just in math and science. So take the hardest class load that you can. If your school doesn't have APs, yikes, what do? Well, it's actually not a bad thing. You can view it as, you can say it as I give up, or you can see it as an opportunity. So we had a student, 11th grade, who came to me and said, I have no APs, and my school's not going to let me take any APs. What do I do? So what we did was say, hey, what are you interested in? And so we built a list. He self-studied for 5 APs in 11th grade. And he got 5s in all of them. Nothing to do with school. And so, look, that's an opportunity because it shows initiative. It shows, look, I am not going to let a lack of opportunity stop me. My interest and passion in the sciences and in academic career is so strong, I will create opportunity for myself. That's what we did in one of his essays. We used that to talk about his perseverance, his willingness to set stretch goals for himself, and the ability to achieve results. Right? We told a story around, I can't control what school I go to. I couldn't afford private school. I went to a school that didn't have APs. But that doesn't stop me and my desire to learn and to challenge myself. So I took a risk and I self-studied for 5 APs. And I felt like I wanted those APs because I wanted to get a head start in college. And I knew it could have actually completely ruined my chances if I didn't get 5s on all of them. But I did it anyway. I was willing to take that risk. I had enough confidence in myself, and I worked hard enough where I felt I could do it. And I did. And I'm super proud of it. And I want to tell you, Mr. Admissions Officer, about this story because I want to prove to you that I could do even more if I went to Harvard or to MIT and had infinite resources available to me. I could do so much with so little. Imagine if I had a lot. Right? And so that's an aspect of how you can turn something like that into an opportunity to show a key area of personal, right? That personal score. You can also look to other sources. The community colleges are also a great resource, especially for some of the common higher level math courses. Like, if you're telling me you're going to be a math major and want to study in math, I'd say, hey, after Calculus BC, if you get the chance, I'd love to see multivariable calculus, linear algebra, differential equations. Very few schools offer that, but community colleges do. There's an opportunity there. But overall, look, just go with the most difficult and challenging course load that you can and feel comfortable with. And you should know yourself the best, right? So don't take 7 APs and get Cs in all of them. That's counterproductive. Finally, I'll close out with the A in a non-AP versus B in an AP. And I'll just be honest with you guys. Look, the caliber of the student who are going to get into the top schools will get the A in the AP. It's not a trade-off. It's not a trade-off. If you aspire to these top schools, go get the A in the AP. Go be willing to take the risk, to take the harder class, and get the good grade, because that's what you need. That's what you need to show. I don't need the math major who's not willing to take calculus. Right? I don't need the physics major who's had calculus but takes physics 1 instead of physics C. That's actually counterproductive. So I'll say, why are you challenging yourself? Finally, I'll close out with that, because I'm sure there's a lot of stressed out parents and students here. It's okay not to get straight A's. You don't have to get straight A's. I didn't get straight A's. A lot of folks that I know got into MIT, that I interviewed got into MIT, didn't get straight A's. A lot of students I worked with as a coach and a counselor got into good schools, Ivy League schools, without getting straight A's. So it's okay. Because academics is just one of the criteria that you're evaluated with. Okay? Even if you have a 4.5 GPA, you can still not get in if the rest of your application isn't good. But if you have a 3.0 GPA out of 4, it might be a little tough. So if it's too low, it can hurt you. If it's close enough in the range, don't sweat it. Focus on, there's nothing you can do about it. You got the B in 9th grade, you're in 12th grade now, what are you going to do? Not apply? Right? If you don't apply, I can guarantee you won't get in. So let's just go make the best of what you have and put together the strongest application that you can. That's what I'll say about grades and GPA. So let's talk about the interview. I've done a lot of interviews. But when I was interviewing for MIT, I did about 25 a year. And here's how it works. The schools actually take this really seriously. They offer an interview to every person who completes an application. Some schools will say, hey, you know what? It's optional. You should do the interview. You should do the interview. I can't stress it. You should do the interview. It is the only chance you get to talk to a real human being about your application, about yourself. It is the only chance throughout the entire process you get to talk to a real person. So you got to take advantage of it. Right? And the interviewer, I'm trained, right? The MIT tells you, Bob, this is what I want you to get out of that interview with this student. These are the things that you should say in your interview report. And I'll talk a little bit actually, what I do, right? The interview's generally about an hour, hour and a half. I talk for 45 minutes. I let the student ask me questions for 15. I ask questions for 45. The student asks me questions for 15. The one part of the interview you can't control is who interviews you. You get assigned. You get somebody like me. I don't know if you're lucky or not, but I know I've done this before, so I know what I'm after. I know what questions to ask. I unfortunately also know, if you've been well prepped, if you're training, if you're lying, if you're making stuff up, I can tell all that pretty easily. But I also can steer you to making sure that I know what's important about you. You could also get an interviewer who's doing it for the first time. You could be the first interviewer this person has ever done. What do you do then? And I'll tell you what you should do then in just a second. So after the interview, I fill out a form, and this is true all the schools, right? And for me, I'll spend actually more time writing up the report than in the interview. Right? I write my impressions about the student. I write text, several pages long. And then at the end, I'm asked to give score, 1 through 5. These are MIT's. It's actually pretty similar to Harvard's. Right? We just use different words. Engagement and joyfulness. Did they take initiative? Are they intellectually curious? If they like physics, how far did they go over and above classes to explore physics? Right? Some students said, oh, I tried to build a nuclear reactor once. It's an interesting story. It shows initiative. I mean, he didn't actually do it, thankfully. But I mean, it shows curiosity, and I like that. Right? And it shows motivation. So those are characteristics for engagement and joyfulness. The second thing is personal qualities. Pretty much exactly the same as how Harvard thinks about personal. Right? Can you contribute to the community? How confident are you? And I'll talk about how you show these a little bit later. The third is pretty interesting in that this is more MIT specific, the match. Do I feel, having graduated from MIT, do I feel like this person is a good fit culturally? Because MIT, unlike a lot of folks, is obviously very science and technology and engineering, math focused. It is research focused. More so than a fine arts or a liberal arts school, we want to know that you can collaboratively work with a team to go solve a problem. Research is not done by yourself in a lab anymore. You work with a research group. You probably work across universities to solve the toughest problems. Can you do that? Right? Can you take advantage of all the resources that are going to be available to you? Once I've done all of that, then there's one overall. The overall does not have to be the average of the three. Overall, this is my recommendation, saying, hey, what do I think? And my choices are, look, ranging from absolutely admit this person top 1% of all I've met, all applicants I've met, to 3 is typical good student. They have to have something outstanding somewhere else in order to admit them, to definitely don't. I do have a silver bullet. It's the +1. So I don't know if you guys noticed the term silver bullet, but it is if I encounter a 1 in a million student, some student who's so good, who I'm so impressed with, that if they don't accept the student, I will fly to Boston and tell the admissions committee they're crazy for turning them down. I can check that box and explain why. So I do have that. I mean, so that's the interview is important. I can provide an incredibly strong push and recommendation for that student. I've done it 3 times in my 19 years, and they all got in. Okay, so with that, I mean, there's a couple key things just to take away. Look, this is important, right? And we'll talk more about this in the essay section as well on these criteria. Because they're the same across most of the universities. Everybody has their own little unique flavor to it, but overall they're the same, and the things you got to do to demonstrate this stuff is the same. So how do you prepare? How do you make sure you have a great interview? The first thing you should do is figure out the story. Do not, so this is the example. What do you do if you have a person who's interviewing for the first time? Do not depend on the interviewer to draw out information from you, right? But even before the interview, actually before you even pick up pen to paper for your essays, know your story. Have a view of what are the 2 or 3 or 4 unique things about me that I want to talk about. And for each of those traits, characteristics, accomplishments, whatever, have a story and an example. People don't remember I'm a diligent student, right? Or I like to challenge myself and set stretch goals. Great. People don't remember that. People remember stories. People remember I took a risk, self-studied for 5 APs and got 5s on all of them. So have examples and have stories, because that's what's going to be powerful. You know what? I'm going to write that story in my report. I'm going to say, I evaluated this person high on engagement and joyfulness because of his initiative. And let me tell you why I think his initiative is so good. So have a story ready, have the key points. You cannot leave the interview without having told the interviewer those key points. That's the mentality you should go in an interview with. That way it doesn't matter if you get me who's done it for 20 years or you get the person who's interviewing for the very first time. You control the content. Otherwise, you're leaving yourself at the mercy of luck in who you get for the interviewer. As I interview, oftentimes I get asked, what should I bring to the interview? My answer is nothing. Just bring yourself. I just want to talk. And it's true. I just want to talk. You don't need to prepare anything for me. Just be ready to tell me about yourself. But I've never turned down a resume. If a student shows up with a resume and says, Bob, here's a resume of my accomplishments, I take it and I use it. So don't ask. Just create the resume, give it to the person. Because it will help. Even if they don't want it, they will not refuse it. They will take it and they will use it. I guarantee it. If you did something that you can show, a picture, if you like music and you can record it on YouTube. If you have an app and want to give me a demo, do it. I had one kid, he liked magic, so he did a magic trick for me at our interview. He said, I like to perform it. I do it at birthday parties, and as a side business, but I really enjoy magic. It's great. Has an impact. I remember it. This was 15 years ago, and I still remember that. He went, turned around, and all of a sudden he went from shirt and tie to like a t-shirt, like without taking off his clothes. It was amazing. So the interview today is a little bit different. I think the world is a little bit more casual today, so don't wear a suit, don't wear a tie, don't wear a t-shirt either, or shorts. Just wear something normal. Wear a collared shirt and wear pants. Okay. The world's also changed that you can find out anything about anybody through the power of the internet. So learn something about your interviewer. You're going to know their name. You're going to know what school they went to. Based on that, you should be able to tell at least the person's job, what their experiences are, and anything else that they've done that's noteworthy. Do the research, do the homework, and use it. I've had a student impress me by saying, Mr. Yang, I'm really interested in computer science and specifically security. And I see that you work for a computer security company. And my email, had just gotten hacked, and I don't know how they did it. Can you tell me what you're seeing in terms of how the bad guys are attacking people? Knew something about me, tied it to his computer science interest. I could tell he knows about current events. It just shows that it's the little things, right? He shows initiative. He's willing to go the extra mile to learn something about me and relate it to him. It's the little effort. It's the person who's willing to go the extra mile versus say, oh, what did you major in at MIT?